In this section I'm going to talk about the trigger settings. We have a trigger button here. If I press this, you'll see all of our trigger options appear here. I've got 4 basic options and I've got an advanced tab here which takes me through to some other ideas. So if I come back here, before I can really talk about any of this, we need to understand what a trigger is. So inside these drums, there's something that they call a trigger. Now what is a trigger? All it basically is one of these. Now it's something called a piezo transducer, and it looks a little bit, if I hold it in this camera here like this, like a little coin. And it's actually the same thing you get when you get a Christmas card that plays a tune or something like that. So it's actually a little buzzer. What happens with these? 2 pieces of metal, when it's manipulated anyway, or if it's tapped, it creates a tiny electrical charge. That electrical charge travels down here, through the cables, into the module. And the module basically figures out from how much electric's come in, how hard it's been hit, or how much it's been moved. And the way that Roland have adapted these, and pretty much every company's done this, they put it in the middle of the drum. They've got a little cone of foam on top of it, like this here. And what happens is when I make contact with the head, the vibrations go down that little foam cone. They touch this, and as I just said, it goes down the cables into here. So to give you an idea of how simple this is, if I quickly show you this. So no other electrics involved, and you can see this one here actually is broken. You can see how easy they are to create. If I just hold that on there and just tap it, if I lightly, or so real simple technology. So all of the technical stuff is in here. So to our first screen, what we've got here, well, we've got trigger bank. Trigger bank, there's 4 different trigger banks in this particular module, and banks just mean that in here I tell it what particular model of drum I've got. So in other words, it can understand every one of those triggers I've just shown you, different sizes of them, different size of drum, may send a slight different signal down there. So for the module to understand what it's got coming towards it, we tell it on here. So on here you can see, for instance, I've got, if I hit the bass drum, I've got a kick drum here, kick drum 120, and that's what I've got. And this guy here, snare, PD105. Well, this isn't a PD105, so if I play this, it will work, right? But the trigger settings won't be perfect. So it's not bad, but really what I've got here is the PD125. So what I've got to do in my bank of settings, I go across to number 2, use the cursors here to go up and down, and I will simply change that to whatever I've got. Now if I go back up, the PD125 is on here. Look. So what that's done, that's told this module that these settings that this will have, and that's basically been designed by Roland themselves. And so when we go into the basic setup, the sensitivity and the threshold and the curve, which I'll explain in a minute, have all been set, and in here, scan time, retrigger, they've all been set for that pad. So if I go to a different pad, there'll be different figures in there. Now straight out of the factory, Roland make these pretty much identical, right? There's not much difference at all. So why bother having all these settings anyway? Well, it's because there's so many variables that will change how much electricity is passed down that cable. Right? The first thing is weight of sticks. Real big heavy sticks, it's going to send more of a vibration. Someone who thinks that this is loud compared to someone who thinks this is loud is going to again change it. We've got the tension of the head will make a difference. The size of the drum. Now all of these settings here, straight out of the box, are pretty good, right? So if I play this now, however, right, sometimes we're going to get problems with this, and I'm going to talk about that now. Or sometimes we'll get little tweaks that we need to do. Now, to be able to make tweaks, you have to first of all understand what the hell all these things mean, like sensitivity, threshold. So I'm going to quickly talk through those. I'm going to relate it to something called hotspots. Now, not everyone's going to have this problem, but for those who do, we'll talk about it in this video. What the hell's a hotspot? Well, as I mentioned, the cone that we hit is right in the middle of this drum. So if this represents that cone, I put it right in the middle of the drum. When I play, if I play to the edge of that, we don't have something called a hotspot. When I hit that cone exactly on top of it, what happens is sometimes it sends way more of a vibration than anywhere else on the drum. And so suddenly when you're playing normally, suddenly there's this sudden spike of sound that comes through, and that's called a hotspot. Now we've got ways of trying to get rid of that on here. tensioning the head is the first way of doing that. So when you buy one of these and it's quite loose, you're going to get that a lot worse than when you tighten it up. Learning to play differently on electric kits. So when I play on electric kits now, I don't really aim right in the middle of the drum. You hear these stories of people having lessons where they have to play on a 50p piece and things like that. Well, I forget that. With electric drums, we're going to be playing either side of that. So I'm going to be kind of this distance either side to get that nice clear sound. And I've kind of adapted my playing without even thinking about it now, that when I play on electric kits, even though it's not always a problem, the hotspot, I always play like that. So rather than right on that. Now you can see there's not that much of a hotspot on this one, alright, because the settings are not bad, but just go with me on this, alright, because some people will have this problem. Okay, so if we go into these settings, trigger, bank, we've talked about. One thing I did miss on the banks, why was there 4? Well, the idea of this is that this kit that I'm playing on here has got this PD-125. I might have another kit at a studio somewhere which has got a different pad. So what I can do is I can set this kit up here. I can go to the studio with my module. I can change to number 2. Oops, changing the wrong thing here. Let's change that back. I can go back to number 2 to change the different bank, and I could make this one the other pad. If I've got a TD-20 at home and I've got a TD-12 here, it's already set up for me. So that's the idea of the banks. Now the basic settings then. Sensitivity, well, all that's talking about, really pretty obvious, is how sensitive the drum is. So this is that one where we've got someone who plays jazz really quiet, or someone who plays heavy metal, to use kind of extreme examples. We're probably going to want to change this. So what I would start off by doing is just tapping the edge of the drum, or the middle of the drum, and in your mind, whatever a tap is, just have a little play around with that and see how it affects it. So obviously as I go higher, and as I go lower. Now if I go too low, what's happening is even when I'm playing loud, get no volume from it. So I've got to get the perfect balance between it being nice and quiet but also nice and loud. Now on these modules you're going to see that this area here shows me the trigger settings, the velocity settings, and you'll notice that instead of going up to 10 like we would with volume, we go up to this 127. So 127 is a MIDI thing, and that basically means it's reached the maximum it's ever going to reach. No matter how much harder I hit it, it's never going to go louder than that. So what I'm going to do to begin with, I'm going to hit the drum at full volume, and I'm going to bring that down until I go below 127. So for this drum, kind of 3, 4 maybe 5. So I'm going to stick it with 4 at the moment. So I've got full dynamics now. Okay, next one down, threshold. That's to do with, all that has to happen is a certain amount of electricity has to pass down this guy here before it makes a noise. And obviously the repercussions of that are that if I tap it really lightly, too lightly, we don't get anything. Now this threshold 2 is pretty quiet. Why would you want threshold? Let's say you're playing in a gig and your bass player, every time he plays, one of the cymbals just wobbles a little bit and it keeps making a noise. Then you might change the threshold to be a little bit louder. The other pad that I'm going to show you quickly now, when I hit this, you'll see it changes to my kick drum. The natural sensitivity for that at the moment is 5. If we've got guys who play with a beater, the rebound, you might not have as much problem. If you bury the beater, you might sometimes get those extra kind of noises. Or you turn the threshold up, you'll get the first one, but won't get the others. So if I turn that right up, we're going to get, no matter how much I bounce at 23, I'm not getting any noise. So what was that? Around 13, wasn't it? Okay, back to my snare drum. Curve then. We're going to come back to curve in a minute, right? Let me just quickly change something else. So, advanced settings. In the advanced settings, we've got 3 things: scan time, retrig, cancel, mask time. The top one's the one that we're looking at here, scan time. With scan time, we're talking about the peak of a hit. Now, let me see if I can do my best to explain this to you guys. If I hit a drum, then when the electricity goes down there to the module, it doesn't all go at the same time. So let's pretend we're talking at 1,000 volts, right? 1,000 volts doesn't hit that module straight away, right? It builds up. So it starts from 0, goes to 20, 30, 40, 100, 500, then eventually reaches 1,000. Now that happens really quickly, but all the scan time does, it helps the module understand when the peak of the volume, or this case, the volts are going to reach it. So what that does for this is this is also kind of affects the size, let's call it, of the middle of the drum. Now, what the hell does that mean? Well, let me just show you one other thing. These drums come with positional sensing. If I hit the edge of the drum, you can see this guy here that's telling me that I'm playing the outside. And as I come inwards, it will start to move in until eventually it knows I'm hitting the middle of the drum. So if we think of that as a circle that's on here, that's got this, as it goes out, we've got middle, kind of halfway edge. Well, when I hit the edge of this, the amount of build-up that there is in this piezo transducer before it gets here means that the further out I go, the scan time changes. Obviously the opposite, the vice versa is true for that. So this idea of this scan time, one of the repercussions of that, because it's designed to kind of help with this hotspot idea, but one of the repercussions is as I move to the edge of the drum, to the middle, if I change the scan time down, I end up not changing for ages. So edge, edge, edge. It didn't really change the middle. If I turn up to about 116, I think, then the edge now is kind of here. If you listen, this is edge, edge, middle. So what I would often do with this is I'd start at 1.6. I don't know why that particular figure works well, but 1.6 below tends to be a problem with this particular pad. 1.6 upwards tends to be okay. And I'd start to just sort of figure out between 1.6 and 1.8 what feels like it changes at the right time. And when I say what feels like it changes at the right time, I'm talking about when I play on an acoustic snare drum, at what point does it make the edge sound and change to the middle sound. So for me, I like it fairly wide. I don't really want a lot of edge sound. I'm not going to play the edge very often. So this hotspot then, if I go over the top of it, you can hear those hotspots popping through. Well, this will also affect that. Sometimes I can find a perfect figure during the scan area to sort of bring that hotspot down a bit, right? But the other area that I said I'd miss, and I'm now going to go back to, will help that a little bit more. So if I go exit that and we go back to our basic settings, let's talk about this curve real quickly. So the curve is talking about, as I get more velocity on this drum, for every time I get a little bit louder, a little bit louder, a little bit louder, a little bit louder, the module that does the same thing. So in other words, if I really tap this drum, say 2 out of 10, this plays 2 out of 10. If I hit this 5 out of 10, that plays 5 out of 10. Hit this 10 out of 10, that plays. Well, the way we change that curve is we sometimes have a curve where when I hit quiet, it's already at 3. I hit a little bit louder and it's already at 6 on this, right? I'm playing at 3 on here, but it's at 6 at that. So in other words, we go from quiet to loud really quick, and then it doesn't get much louder. And we get the reverse of that as well. So we've got exponential curves, which is this shape. So in other words, it stays quiet for a long time. So I'm medium here, but it's still quiet, and suddenly it gets loud at the end, right? That one's good for some things, but not for this. If I go to the log, I want it to get loud quite quick, because on acoustics now, that's what happens. And then build up from there. Now log 1 or log 2, both of them might work for you, but what you'll find now is my quiet notes, if you listen and you look on here, you can see they're already fairly loud. The good side of this is, now that it's reaching 127 or 120, let's say, when I'm in the middle, even if I get a sudden spike now, in other words a hot spot, it doesn't go up any more than 127, so it's not going to jump through as much. So it's not really a hot spot. Now the downside, what we just spoke about, the sensitivity. So what I would now maybe go and do, I go up to my sensitivity setting, I just bring that down again, maybe to 2. And hopefully then I get a full range. And that's that. Now, as I mentioned at the start, sometimes straight out the box, you'll set it up and the built-in default setting will be perfect, so you don't have to worry about what I've just done. For those guys who are getting problems with the hotspot, play around with those settings, because slightest adjustments of those over weeks and months will eventually get you the perfect feeling electric kit. Now let's just go through and see if there's anything else I've missed. So sensitive, we've done threshold, curve. Hi-hat we'll come back to in a moment when I put a hi-hat on here. Crosstalk. So crosstalk, what's that mean? In electric terms, all we're talking about here, if I hit my tom here, and every time I hit my tom, a little vibration travels down the frame and maybe triggers my bass drum. So every time I hit this, I literally get a little noise afterwards, or my snare, something like that. That's called crosstalk. So I'm not meaning this to trigger, but from hitting something else it does. Well, these settings here basically tell the pad not to do that. So all I do is I find the pad that's the culprit. So in this case, let's say it's the bass drum, and it's set to 20. Well, the higher I turn that, the less chance there is of crosstalk. So I want to probably put it up 5 at a time. I think it goes 5 at a time anyway. So I might go up a little bit, try the same thing. Maybe it fixed it. In here we've got mounts. So this is just more information for this guy to figure out what's going on. You can tell it whether it's a pad or whether it's a cymbal or whether it's separate. So in other words, this snare drum, this bass drum's a pad, but really it's separate because it's on the floor. So I may tell it it's separate, and this guy here, he's also separate. And groups are just telling where the problem persists. So if every time I hit my ride cymbal, my tom triggers, then I might put those in a group, and then every time I hit my snare drum, my ride cymbal triggers, so I put those in a separate group. Now, crosstalk isn't a major problem with the Roland stuff, but some of the other brands, if you're mixing and matching kits, you might have to have a look at some of that stuff. Okay, let's just double check the advanced settings. Okay, so let's have a look in here. After scan time, we've got rim gain. In fact, I've missed one out of mine. Let's go back to advanced. So rim shot, re-trigger cancel and mask time. Both of those guys there are to do with mistriggering. If you buy some triggers and you put them on an acoustic kit, the head on an acoustic kit, if you go on YouTube and search for slow motion snare drum or something like that, you'll see that when it's hit, it goes whoom, 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 and it moves like, looks like about 100 times right per second. It just goes up and down like this. Well, those little triggers in there are going to be constantly sending a small amount of data, because every time it goes up and down, that little bit of vibration is picked up. So these guys in here, re-trigger, cancel and mask time, both help the module understand exactly what speed that's kind of moving at. Now, because every drum you put a trigger on might be different, they couldn't put 1,000 different drums on there as setup. So you have to go in and check those guys out. There's more detailed information on that in the manual. The basics of it are that when you hit the drum, it triggers, and as the head comes back up, it'll send another little bit of electricity after. And so you're basically telling it at what point the first bit of electricity is finished and at what point the second bit's starting to build up. And if you get that correct, it'll get rid of any secondary triggers. Okay, 3-way is just to switch on when you've got some of the more expensive cymbals. It will tell if you're in the middle of the cymbal or the edge. Positional, we've spoken about, so the edge to the middle. In here, the only options you've got here is on and off. So some people just, for whatever reason, might not like the idea of having a different sound at the edge to the middle. Maybe you have a clap sound and you want it to sound the same all the way through or something like that. Well, let's go to then the rim section. So let's go back through that. So basic, advanced, and the rim. Where's the rim? Obviously it's here. In this module, in this drum, piezo transducer in the middle, another one stuck to the shell, and that's basically how these drums work. Rim gain is just talking about, if I hit this, there's a certain level of, again, electricity passing down here to make the noise. If I take the rubber off and hit it, all of a sudden it's way more electricity can be passing down there. So to help the module understand what the hell you want, in here, you change the rim gain. So you can see as the box, straight out of the box, 2.2 is correct. If that's not enough volume for me, I turn that up. If there's too much going through, I turn that down. Again, that might suffice if you were playing in a band and you just wanted some clap sounds on the rim, and you just wanted them really loud all the time, turn that full volume, and you'll get the full sound that you're after. Rim shot adjust. Again, this is another trigger problem, really more than it is for these drums. Sometimes if you hit the head really loud, that little piezo transducer on the side will pick up and it will make a rim sound. And this basically adjusts that kind of upwards and downwards so you can avoid that. So if you're hitting the rim shot and you're not getting one, try turning that up, and vice versa. If you're hitting the drum and you're getting a rim shot, turn that down. Cross stick threshold. So cross stick on these drums, unlike acoustic, you can't yet do this. TD-50 you can, alright, but anyone who's got any other ones, you have to put it here to do it. Now in the kit setup, if I go to my kit along the bottom of here, I've got cross stick written here. So I press that button, and now when I do this, I've got that cross stick sound. Now if I hit it harder and harder, eventually, to really hit it, in fact, eventually we'll make that rim sound even. So all that threshold's talking about is at what point I should change from the cross stick noise to the rim sound. Because this is all set up for me, it's set up Roland settings, it works fine, right? It may be though that I need to go in there and adjust that anywhere between the 127 and the 0. But anywhere in this kind of area works fine now. and name. So when we click on name on there, don't get confused by naming the kit. This is not naming the kit, this is naming the bank. So remember I said that I might have a bank for the studio, I might have one for something else. I could literally call that studio. I might have another one called church because I take it to church. I might have another one called metal band because I'd use it in my metal band, right? And the only reason of having different banks is if you have different pads, right? If you've got one kit and you're taking it to the different, you're taking the same kit out to one gig, forget it, right? Just call it the same thing. But this is where you change that. Okay, and that's it for trigger settings. I'm just going to double check I haven't mixed anything. So banks done, basics, crosstalk, advanced, three-way position. Yeah. Okay. If you want to know about how the hi-hat works, I'm going to do a video on that right now, so there'll be a link up here somewhere. If I said anything incorrect or you've got any questions about it, feel free. I'm happy to discuss it, and there's some other guys who I'm sure have got a lot of knowledge on this that will help you out. So leave some questions below, and go check out my other lessons. Thanks.